So Derek, do you want to start? You're in the top corner of my screen.
Okay, lucky place to be. So I'm Derek Ward. My background is as a public health doctor, but now I'm the admissions tutor at the University of Birmingham Medical School.
Shan.
Hello everybody, my name is Afshan Ahmed and I'm one of the lecturers and the admissions lead for Aston Medical School.
Thank you. Sam?
My name's Sam Adcock. I am a GP and the admission tutor for the Medicine with Foundation year at Leicester, and also the lead for the foundation year as well.
Thank you. David?
Hi, I'm David O'Brien. I'm a cardiologist by background, and I'm the admissions director for the Lincoln Medical School, a new building behind me.
Thank you. Margaret?
You've already met me. I'm Margaret Barnes-Davies, the admissions lead at Leicester Medical School.
Thank you. Mandy?
And I'm Director for Admissions at the University of Nottingham and a GP when I'm not busy at the university.
Thank you. And Gordon?
I'm Gordon Dent. I'm a pharmacologist by background, and I'm the academic lead for admissions, recruitment and marketing for the School of Medicine at Keele.
Super, thank you. So you've got a range of experts all here, so please do maximise this opportunity if you've got any questions. As I say, you can pop them in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on it. There are also other colleagues in the background, some students and other colleagues that work at universities in the chat looking at questions. But the first question is one that came through earlier, and it says, have you had an increasing number of applicants with achieved A-level grades, and are they at an advantage? So I know Leicester might want to comment on this. So I don't know if Margaret, you want to start with this, and then if anyone else wants to chip in, please do.
Yes, we did have quite a large number of applications from those with achieved A-levels, and because of the way that we invite them to interview, it has meant that there were a lot that were effectively guaranteed an interview with us. But to make it fair, what we've done is we've just interviewed far more students this year. So we're doing somewhere in the region of 1,800 interviews.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone else wants to share their experiences.
For Keele, I'd say I've not analysed it. I've not noticed a particular increase in the number of applicants who've got achieved A-level grades, but it doesn't make any difference to how we select. So it wouldn't have been so apparent to me.
Yeah, and I'd echo that from Birmingham. I don't think we've seen a particular increase, but again, the processes we use, achieved A-levels aren't treated any differently. So it wouldn't have made a difference in who we'd interview.
And I'd say the same. I'd say the same goes for us, and David will say the same. For Nottingham and Lincoln, we don't treat students who have achieved A-level grades any differently in terms of selection for interview or offers.
I was just going to say ours is very similar, same as everyone else.
Sam, did you want to?
Yeah, so I guess it raises a point that came up in both of our workshops, that actually every medical school is slightly different. And one of the things that can really help your students, particularly from a widening participation and foundation year background, is to look at the nitty gritty, because every medical school has different nitty gritty. Now, fair to say, our nitty gritty is going to change after our experience this year. So again, what you can't assume is that what happened last year at a medical school will happen the following year. So we have had our bottom bitten by the fact that we've had to interview a lot more people, because we were trying to help those who had achieved grades, and it's come back to bite us. So one of the real things that can really help people make sure they don't waste applications to medical schools is to look at that criteria, and the Medical School Council is a great place to start because they list it all on one page. You can look at each medical school, so it highlights a real learning point to advisors. Make sure they look at the website and they look at our nitty, because everyone is slightly different in terms of what we do, and it makes life interesting because it means some people might meet the criteria at one medical school and not another, but it also makes it another lot of hoops that people have to jump through, and I think it's worth just being mindful of that as teachers advising students.
Thank you, Sam. That leads on nicely to a question for what would you say is your top tips for students? So probably, Sam, you've shared one of your top tips. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add any top tips that they'd like to share with teachers and advisors today.
I've got my hand up for the last question, but I'll answer this one as well, maybe, is that because it's a similar type thing and it's along the same lines that Sam pointed out, that one of the things I often say to students as individuals is that they really must play to their strengths. And they mustn't just be guided by people giving them kind of generic advice. So it's a very similar thing to Sam has said, that we are all different. And one of the comments I was going to make about the last question was that it's not good enough to have looked at the website the year before, or as a teacher and advisor to have looked at that website in the last cycle and think that it will be the same, because we are actually all guilty of kind of changing things each admission cycle slightly, and it might just be more than slightly. So what you think might be Nottingham or Lincoln's selection criteria one year might not necessarily be the same the following year. So students really should look at each of those things and then see in their personal situation where they're best placed to get an offer. That's what I would advise people to do. And that's very different for different medical schools. So really kind of play to your strengths. And if you look at a website and think, actually, I'm not very good at X, and that's what this medical school selects on, don't go there. Even if your teacher says it's a good idea, you know, basically as a student, do your research and use that to decide where you want to apply.
Thank you. Gordon?
I was going to make the points also about things changing. So the most striking thing over the past year or so has been some medical schools trying to reduce their reliance on GCSE grades because of a loss of confidence in GCSE standards during the pandemic. So you may, if you've had students this year applying to Oxford, you'll have seen that they changed the way they're selected for interview and stopped using GCSE grades. The way they did it, you may want to raise questions about. In terms of top tips, and it's also an answer to a question later on about what's made people stand out at interview. The thing that makes people stand out to me is they are entirely natural talking to people. So really, you need to be getting students to think, how well can I demonstrate that I'm able to engage with people, to find out things from them and explain things to them. And really, if they don't do it as part of what they do at school or college, or do it as part of a voluntary role or a paid job, they need to be trying to find out how they can develop those strengths. Because somebody who works every weekend in a shop where they're talking to customers all the time will inevitably come across better in an interview because they're just more used to it.
Thank you, Afshan.
I'm really sorry, I can't find the hand icon on my thing. But if I could just add one thing, whenever we give talks at open days and whenever visitors come, people don't seem to really have a grip on what UCAT is and what BMAT is, and the timing of registering and kind of preparing when they can take it, and the understanding that you have to take it in the year that you're applying. So I think that area is something, I mean, it's perhaps not top tips, but that's an area that I think a lot of young people don't quite understand and can't get their heads around. So that's an area that perhaps advisors and teachers could really find out about and really be up on it and really guide their students who are interested in applying to medicine. Thank you.
Thank you. We've had another question come in saying, many of my students ask me whether I know what UCAT or BMAT score the cut-off point is for people who got an interview at that particular medical school the year before. They said they know a variety of things are looked at, but this is always a specific question. Do medical schools share this information? So I think Mandy got her hand up first. So Mandy, do you want to...
We're all putting our hands up for this one. This has to be the question I am most asked on open days, and everyone else is nodding their head. You cannot use the UCAT score from the previous year to predict what's going to happen in the current year unless there's a published fixed threshold, which some medical schools do have a published fixed threshold. But certainly for Nottingham and Lincoln, it will vary year on year. There would be no point, and it would be very misleading to look at whatever they thought the previous UCAT score was, for many reasons. UCAT changes. The students who apply to any individual university are different each year, and therefore the UCAT score would be different. How we score the UCAT might be different. And actually at Nottingham, we use the UCAT and the GCSE, and Lincoln, we use the UCAT and the GCSE scores to select for interview. So it's a combined thing. So there is absolutely no value really in looking at the previous year's scores.
Thank you, Margaret.
So I absolutely agree with what Mandy said, and we likewise use a combined GCSE and UCAT score. The only thing I would say is we do publish year on year our statistics, just so that students can look, so they can see year on year what score got to interview, but that changes. Like this year, we had a 25% increase in our applications, and so the score to get to interview obviously went up as well. And as with grade inflation, I'm imagining there's also a bit of grade inflation coming through in the GCSEs as well. So as that comes through, then again, those scores will go up. So the score to get to interview is going to change. So it's there published so they can look as a guide, but it's, you know, year on year it changes.
What always makes me laugh is however much we say this, and we all say it in agreement, and we all say it every single time, there's always this look that you get when you say it, that you're just basically not telling the truth in some way, and that you're still trying to hide the truth from people, which is that you have some magical cut score in your head that you just apply to everybody. I don't know what it is, but that happens every time.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, so I agree with the cutoff, but there are some rules that we do follow. So things like having an SJT of 4, we wouldn't accept it at Leicester. So there sometimes people think, well, actually I've got a really high score, but my SJT is 4. Maybe they'll just overlook it. We won't. So there are some rules that they can follow. So things like having an SJT 4, I would be very surprised if any medical school would accept that. So there are some rules that they can follow, but the cutoff isn't necessarily one of them.
Thank you, Gordon.
So I just wanted to follow up on the rules are rules. Your students do need to appreciate if we say what requirements are for entry, or we say there's going to be a cut-off for a particular thing we're measuring, students should not assume that we're going to waive that because they're special. If somebody has significant extenuating circumstances and they think a medical school might take them into account of waiving requirements, and they might not, but they might, they need to contact them before they apply. Do not just apply in the expectation that we will make a special for you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Nope. Super. So I've got another question that's come in. What advice would you give to students who are not academically able to get onto a traditional medicine degree? This person is a sixth form mentor, and sometimes students are adamant they want to do medicine, but they haven't got the GCSE grades to get into medicine. Margaret?
So at Leicester, we will accept resits of GCSE English language and maths. But having said that, we score the first sit, so they would still be at a disadvantage unless they had mitigating or extenuating circumstances, which they had contacted us about beforehand and we had agreed to it. For example, if someone is recently arrived in the country and sat their English language and it wasn't their first language, then we might overlook the scoring of the first sit. But otherwise we score the first sit, so they're still at a bit of a disadvantage. But Mandy and I ran a session on different entry routes into medicine, and there are lots of different entry routes into medicine. So things like doing another degree and then looking at graduate entry medicine is a very popular thing, and there are many students that go through that route. So it might be that, and they may still have to resit their GCSEs to do that, because some graduate entry courses will require minimum GCSEs. So they may have to still resit those GCSEs and get their A-levels and then join another degree and look at graduate entry medicine. I don't know whether one of the courses that does an accelerated graduate entry course would like to speak more about that.
Do you want me to talk about our graduate entry? So we don't have GCSE requirements apart from the university minimum for maths and English. And there aren't any A-level requirements for our graduate entry course either. So it is definitely a route for students who may be, for whatever reason, maturing later, develop their study skills later, or their motivation, or whatever it might be, and actually, build their strengths and their learning as they go through. So there are definitely other routes through as for graduate entry would be a possibility.
Thank you, Gordon.
The thing students also need to be aware of is where there appear to be less stringent barriers in one respect, and that may be to do with their school qualifications, there will almost certainly be something else that they've got to meet to get through. So in medical schools that don't have particularly stringent GCSE or A-level requirements in terms of grades or A-level subjects, they're probably going to be very heavily focused on aptitude test scores and selecting for interview. With graduate entry, if they're not very strict on what the school leaving qualifications were, they're probably going to, again, have an aptitude test requirement that's quite stringent. So for Nottingham, for example, they're going to need good GAMSAT scores. For Newcastle, they're going to need very strong UCAT scores. So Newcastle may say they're not very concerned on what qualifications you got beforehand, but you have to do very, very well at UCAT in an interview.
Thank you. I've got another question come in. I know this is sort of a common query we get a lot, is a teacher's got a student who isn't a home student, and they're aware that there is a cap on the number of international students for medicine, but is there any advice they can give that student because she is studying at a state school in the UK but isn't a home student? You got any advice, Margaret?
I would just say that sometimes we get students who have been in the UK for some time applying, and then they haven't got indefinite leave to remain at the time that they apply, and then they get it subsequently. If they are looking at getting indefinite leave to remain, I would suggest that they wait, take a gap year and get that indefinite leave to remain first. But if they are an international applicant and they are not intending to get indefinite leave to remain, then they are considered along with all the other international applicants, and there are only a few places. So at Leicester, we're only allowed to take 18 international applicants in any 1 year. If they're schooled in the UK, they may actually find that they actually perform well at interview compared to international applicants who are maybe less familiar with the NHS system, etc. So maybe they shouldn't be too discouraged and go ahead with that application. And if they can get good work experience that they can talk about, and work experience, as Gordon said, that gives them that opportunity to interact with other people so that their communication skills are developed, then that would certainly help.
Super, thank you. So I've got one final question I think that's come through, and if anyone else has got any others they want to pop in the chat. It's asking, do medical schools have a quota for independent versus state schools for applicants? No, big resounding shake of the heads, that's a no from everyone. Super. So I think someone did just ask a question. Are students still eligible for student finance for graduate entry medicine? Which I know is a bit of a complicated, tricky, but Mandy.
Yeah, Jack can answer if you want. So we have a lot of support for students at the University Finance Department to advise them. I'd say it's almost different for every graduate entry student, depending on their personal circumstances. So it is quite, you know, it is a challenge for them to work out, but we do have a lot of advice available for them. And also we have students who are graduates on our 4-year graduate entry course and on our 5-year course as well. So it's different. And they also would get there's the NHS bursary as well, which is not student finance and isn't a loan in the way that student finance is. So I think they need individual advice depending on their circumstances.